My husband signed our house over to his mistress and told me to move out by morning. He slid a stack of papers across the kitchen counter and told me to pack. He said the house was hers now, and I had until morning to be gone. We were married 8 years and the house was the one thing I'd never questioned. He handled the paperwork, I handled the bills, we both worked, we paid it off together, or so I thought. Things started feeling off when he stopped sleeping in our bed. He said he was stressed at work and needed space. I believed him. Then I found receipts for hotel rooms under a name I didn't recognize, and a dozen takeout orders for a different address late at night that he couldn't explain. I asked him about the receipts and he told me I was being paranoid. He told me to calm down and that I was imagining things. 2 weeks before he handed me the papers, he started locking the study door. He told me he was working late and needed the privacy to focus. Then the morning he shoved the deed at me, I noticed a recording notice on my phone. A county clerk had processed a quitclaim deed that morning, transferring ownership to a woman who'd been living in the guest room for months. I walked to the county records office and pulled the recorded deed myself. It had his signature, it had a notary stamp, it had a recording number and a timestamp from 3 days ago. When I shoved the paper in his face and asked him how he'd done it, he shrugged and said he had every right to. He said I could take him to court if I wanted, but he had the deed and movers scheduled. They actually came that afternoon. A U-Haul, a couple of men who said they worked for him, and a woman with a baby bump who walked through my house like she owned it. Neighbors stood on their lawns and watched. He handed one of the movers another set of keys and told me calmly that I'd have to sue if I wanted the house back. I slept on my sister's couch that night with a trash bag of clothes and my phone on airplane mode. I woke up and checked messages. His calls were all missed and full of one-word texts I blocked. My first lawyer told me to breathe. The second one told me the brutal truth. If the title was only in his name, he could legally transfer it. That was the part that shattered me more than anything. I'd treated ownership like a shared thing, but his name alone on the deed meant I had to fight hard to stay. Things got worse when the mortgage company called. They said the account was current, but the deed holder could do what he wanted if he owned the title free and clear. My heart dropped when an eviction notice arrived in a plain white envelope. It said a court had been petitioned to remove me if I didn't vacate voluntarily. I cried. I called my mother. She told me to call Dad. Dad told me to call a lawyer. Everyone had advice. Nobody had an answer that kept me in my bed. I spent nights on a friend's couch and days collecting every paper I could find. Mortgage payments, bank transfers, copies of the renovation receipts, emails with suppliers where I was CC'd. Then I found something that changed everything. A tiny detail on the recorded deed. The notary's registration number didn't match the name stamped on the paper. I called the state notary board because you don't get that kind of curiosity if you're not desperate. They told me there was no record for that registration number. The name on the deed wasn't in their database. I asked for help, and a real estate attorney pushed me to get a certified copy. When the county clerk pulled the original stamped copy, the notary stamp looked different under magnification. We had it analyzed. The forensic ink test said the stamp had been applied after the page was printed. The signature matched his handwriting, but someone had used a stolen notary stamp and forged the official seal. He panicked when I called him with that information. He went from calm to angry to pleading in the span of an hour. I walked into the kitchen where he was packing a bag, and I did the dumb brave thing. I recorded everything on my phone because I knew proof mattered more than his words. I called the police. I filed a forgery report and handed them a copy of the forensic test. They told me forgery was a criminal act and started the paperwork while I waited with my keys in a trembling hand. When the detectives questioned him, he sputtered explanations about how stressed he was and how he'd done it to make sure the other woman had a roof over her head. He said things that made no legal sense and revealed more than he intended. The DA took an interest because forging a notary seal and filing a fraudulent deed in public records is a serious crime. Once criminal exposure was on the table, his tone shifted. He begged me in private to not press charges. He said if I dropped the report, he would sign a deed back that day and move out. I remember feeling sick, thinking I had to bargain away the truth to get my home back. But I also couldn't stomach a drawn-out trial with a man who'd already shown what he was capable of. We went to the title company under the lawyer's watch. He signed documents that transferred the house back, and he signed a separate agreement promising to vacate and to never contact me again. The title company held everything that day until escrow confirmed the signatures and the county clerk accepted the retransfer. They added a note to the file that criminal charges were pending and that the transfer would be monitored. That should have been the end, but life wasn't neat. He doubled down on smear attempts, texted mutual friends, and tried to paint me as the bad one. The DA called me in for a statement, and a month later he was charged with forgery and fraud related to the deed. He pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor after a deal that included restitution of court costs and mandatory counseling. No jail time, but a criminal record. I still had to fight in civil court to clear the title officially and to get his name off any future claims. The lawyer scheduled hearings. The mistress sued for a portion of the house at one point, claiming she was an innocent third party who had no idea. That claim fell apart fast when the phone records showed months of calls between my husband and her, and when the county's notary board confirmed the stamp had been forged. During those hearings, I learned a lot about human greed, and also about how many people will choose a shiny selfie over truth. I learned that the legal system moves slow and that you need patience and proof on your side. My friends were my backbone. One of them stayed with me for 2 weeks while the hearings got sorted, and my sister took care of my dog without asking for anything. When the judge finally ordered the title cleared and restored, I slept at home that night without locking the bedroom door. It was the first time in months the house felt like a place I belonged, instead of a battleground. He moved out 2 weeks later with the smallest possible suitcase. He took the guest room television, the guilt, and whatever illusions he had left. I changed every lock that day and put a new alarm system in. I also changed the password on every account and set up automatic notifications from the county so I'd know immediately if anything was filed. People asked why I didn't press for more punishment. Because I wanted my life back more than I wanted to break him. And because dragging it out would have put me through more pain than I needed. Months later, the papers were clean and the house was in my name again, officially and legally. I still see the empty guest room and feel that hot flash of betrayal, but it doesn't control my lungs anymore. I set boundaries with my parents and told them they needed to choose where their loyalty lived. They chose both sons, mostly out of habit, but they stopped inviting him to events that included me. I started therapy and called it the hardest thing I'd ever willingly paid for. Sitting with a professional and saying the ugly parts out loud was the closest thing to feeling human again. I repaired what I could in the house. I saved, painted the study myself, planted a row of lavender by the front walkway, and stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. My lawyer told me to consider selling the house if staying would feel like staying in a wound. But every time I pushed open the front door, I felt a little stronger, so I stayed. He texts sometimes from blocked numbers asking for forgiveness. I delete the messages and keep a screenshot in a folder labeled court evidence. A year after he tried to bury me under forged paper, I sat out front with coffee and a neighbor waved. She asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. It wasn't a grand speech or a life lesson. It was true. I still jump when a car pulls into the driveway unexpectedly, but I sleep through the night more often than not. I never expected to fight for the roof over my head the way some people fight for their lives, but that's what I did. The house is mine again, and I'm rebuilding everything else. I still have scars. I still have the memory of him handing me that stack of paper like a final goodbye. But I also have proof that I didn't disappear when he tried to erase me. Some nights I stand on the back porch and look at the garden. I planted lavender because it smells like the exact kind of small, stubborn hope I needed. Nothing about this felt heroic while it was happening. It was terrifying and messy and humiliating. Now the house is quiet in a way that feels like safety. I lock the door, pour a cup of tea, and let myself breathe.